Hello everyone, I welcome you to module 28 of the NPTEL course of UN SDGs. In this module, we are going to cover these 3 points. First one, financing the SDGs and global funds. How the SDGs and their efforts are being actually financed, because each and every effort, each and every scheme, each and every plan which is needs implementation, requires funding, right? And SDGs are, since a global initiative, like a global scheme, so it requires like a funding at global like a scale, right? So that's a mammoth task, huge task, right? So how that actually takes place, we will see. Second one about implementation planning, and third one capacity building and finance, right? So all of these three are like very crucial and important parts, because unless and until these three are not in proper place and are not reinforced, the whole implementation strategy around SDGs may not bear desired fruits, right? So we'll see. Yeah, so the topic 1, financing the SDGs and global funds. So maybe you can refer like this report, like financing for sustainable development report. This presentation, this lecture actually includes like a number of sources, number of books, reports, reference material, research material, etc. And it's a compilation which gives you a comprehensive like a outlook about these 3 topics. But this report I would recommend for you everyone to go through this as a additional like a resource material, okay? And maybe you can look for like the latest one, okay? So what it does like interagency task force on financing for development. So how it all actually like works out, that's what it does. So we will see. So what are those different interagency tasks like a force members? So initially in the lecture 1, in the module 1, we saw the parts of United Nations. So the working parts, executionary parts, like a policy and implementation, like a parts of like United Nations. Okay. So there are these interagency task force members, which are somewhere, like a touching the SDGs with their main mandate, or as a like a secondary mandate, or as an ancillary mandate, right? So somewhere they come and help like SDGs and their implementation also at global scale. So the first being task force coordinator and substantive editor, that is United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, right? So you can see this body works as a coordinator, right? Overall coordinator, task force coordinator. Second, we have financing for development major institutional stakeholders, okay? So you may have heard of these names: World Bank Group, International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Trade Organization, WTO, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, and UNDP, of course. I think in India and several Asian, African and South American countries, it's a very common name. A lot of initiatives for like a water supply, sanitation, healthcare, and many like such things, initiatives you may have seen. If you remember, in the rural India, like a few decades back, there was like this implementation of like a deep borewell, like a hand pumps, right? So the long sized like a hand pumps were like installed at number of places, right? And it helped people like a fetch water, like a groundwater, like a fresh groundwater from a deeper like a pockets, right? So this was also done under like the aegis of UNDP. So several such initiatives you can see which you and me can relate at local level. But yes, there are mainly these agencies also involved which help funding like major activities at national level, international level, regional level, state level, okay? And their influence is also there on like a human society. Then comes regional economic commissions. So we have Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, ESCAP. Okay, this name you will be hearing a lot. Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, Commission for Africa, for Europe, and for Latin America and Caribbean. Okay, so regional economic commissions. Okay, so these ones, the like global ones, and then here we have like regional ones, right? Then there are United Nations system and other agencies and offices. So this is a big list, comprehensive list where you can see different, like other banking, non-banking, and different types of, like agencies, which touch, like this initiative at places. I'll take their names: Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructure, Financial Stability Board, Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, FAO. You may be aware of, like this guarantees the food supply. Global Environment Facility, GEF. This actually deals with the like environmental preservation and taking care of like a forest and many other things. Green Climate Fund, International Association of Insurance Supervisors, International Atomic Energy Agency. This also you may have heard of. This takes care of like atomic like tests and atomic like like other research activities, like nuclear power stations, and like other enrichment programs for like like nuclear arms and armament, like development, etc. So this is the governing body at international level. Then we have International Civil Aviation Organization, International Development Finance Club, International Fund for Agricultural Development, International Labour Organization, ILO, very important one, International Organization for Migration, International Telecommunication Union, International Trade Center, Joint United Nations Program on HIV/AIDS, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Office of High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries and Small Island Developing States, Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Principles for Responsible Investment, Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, South Center, Sustainable Energy for All, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, UN Capital Development Fund, United Nations Children's Fund, United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, United Nations Convention on to Combat Desertification, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, UN Women, United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, United Nations Forum on Forests, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, United Nations Global Compact, UNGC, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, United Nations Human Settlement Program, UN Habitat, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNISDR, United Nations Office for Project Services, United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, United Nations Population Fund, United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, United Nations University, United Nations World Food Program, WFP, World Health Organization, we are all aware of, World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO. Right? So in this module, somewhere, well, not all, but some of these like agencies, we will see their roles and their mechanisms, their functioning, their operations, how they are like bringing change, how they are working for the overall like a comprehensive goal of achieving UN SDGs across the world, and some case studies also. So now coming to the point, what is financing for development? The most basic question. The 2015 conclusion document, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, offers a new global framework for funding sustainable development that harmonizes all finance flows and policies with top goals in the areas of economic, social, and environmental concerns. Supporting the implementation of the agreements and promises made during the three main international conferences on financing for development held in Monterrey, Mexico in 2002, Doha, Qatar in 2008, and Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 2015, is at the heart of the financing for development process. Additionally, the process keeps track of the financing for development related components of the conclusions of significant United Nations economic and social conferences and summits, such as the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. So it begins, from like these conventions and these summits, where the need for financing like like developmental activities, rather sustainable developmental activities, was actually underlined, and a common actually like a agenda was formulated, like how this whole thing is going to get done, right? So you saw like a few places here, like Monterrey in Mexico in year 2002, it was like a spoken of. Then Doha, Qatar in 2008, it was spoken of. Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in 2015. So the at the heart of like these conferences was the financing for development process, right? Plus keeping track of the financing for development related components of the conclusions of significant United Nations economic and social conferences and summits, right? Such as 2030 agenda. Okay, so this is the point for which like this all financing thing is needed, and many others, right? So we will gradually unravel what this whole thing is. Next point, a new global framework for funding sustainable development is offered by the Addis agenda, which supports the implementation of the 2030 agenda, which includes the SDGs. All domestic and international resource flows, laws, and international agreements are in line with the agenda's emphasis on economic, social, and environmental concerns. It provides as a roadmap for future activities by governments, international organizations, and business sector, civil society, and philanthropy, and includes all of the SDG methods of implementation goals into a comprehensive financial network framework. Okay, so if you see like what it provides a framework which binds all of these, which binds the resource flows, like rules, and it frames rules and regulations and laws around it. It talks about international agreements and mutual like agreements in line with the agendas, like emphasis on the like ESG aspects of sustainability, and all of it combined. Plus it brings international organizations, business sector, civil society, philanthropical like organization and agencies and people, and all of them together for the SDG methods of implementation goals into a comprehensive financial framework. So it brings all of those stakeholders, you can say, which are like a crucial for achieving SDGs, whether they are the governments, whether they are the private players, whether they are philanthropists, whether they are implementation agencies, whether they are like a UN body itself, right, on its allied like a sister like a organization or agencies, business sector, right, other like a civil society members and their like inputs, and etc, etc. So they all actually come together and they put in like the efforts for achieving the like a common goal of SDGs. This agenda's particular activities areas are domestic government resources, domestic and foreign private industry, international collaboration for development, international commerce as a development driver, debt and sustainability of debt, addressing underlying problems, developing capacity, innovation, and science and technology. Okay, so if you see with this like a mandate, like these like a bifurcated activities, you can cover majorly like a lot of things. First of all, it talks about domestic government resources. So the government at domestic level, at local level, and its resources. Okay, so bringing all of those resources, the mechanisms which a government is actually like a comprised of, and like utilizing it. Okay, like at national level, if you see, we have like a like a government of India. Then at state levels, we have several states and their governments. Then states are divided into local administrative units of districts. Then in districts we have like a blocks, we have like a cities, mega cities, towns, villages, right? And they all have their own like local administration mechanisms also, whether it is gram panchayat, whether it is like like a municipality, whether it is like a the town like a like a like a areas like a management administration, or things like that. So they all actually become like a comprehensive part of it. Domestic and foreign private industry. Okay, because they are also like an integral part. Like you may be aware of, there is like this clause that industries which are having like a earning, like a revenue above, like a certain, like a threshold, they have to share 2% of, like their revenues as, like a CSR, corporate social responsibility, for the, upliftment and well-being of the society, right? For maybe social activities, for environmental activities, for health, education, water, sanitation, any of such activities they have to contribute, right? So this funding itself, becomes like, quite an, like important tool, right, to, like involve private, like a sector in this whole game. Then we have international collaboration for development. So collaboration at, like an international level. So well, it brings, like a lot of, like a funding, it brings, like a technology, it brings, like a science, it brings, like a exchanges of students and faculty and researchers, right? It brings, like a cultural exchanges, right? It brings, like a language based, like interaction, like a, many such, like interactions, which actually enrich, our cooperation, our collaboration at international level, right? So it can vary in multiple ways. Like, and then if you want to bifurcate, like economics wise, if you see, trade and commerce is very important thing, to, like accommodate these days. No country can function independently. Like, we are all interdependent, we are all helping and supplying each other, we are buying from each other, right? And now it has become like, like a one common, like a global economy, right? So that's why actually it's a good thing also. Well, it poses a lot of challenges also. If something goes wrong in one place, like it has its own repercussions on other places also. But yeah, for good, it is also good that, like if something goes wrong at one part, it can be, like sustained and absorbed by, like others also, right? It can be helped by others also, right? So there are always a like, pros, also there are advantages also of this situation. Well, of course, like a sharing technology and science, etc., an exchange of people, culture, and ideas and thoughts, and like all of those things, which enrich this whole, like experience. Further, we have international commerce as a development, like a driver. So commercial activities, are the biggest, like a drivers, unless and until we have discussed it earlier. There is some, like a economic, like a motivation, so nobody would take up, like that job unless it is a government sector, public sector, okay. But in private sector, nobody is going to do, like any such job. So there should be, like some commercial, like advantage, some, like commercial merit, because that merit itself can become a driver, for this, like a growth and development. Then we have debt and sustainability of debt, like how, like this debt can be like managed at like a global level, at international level, regional level, and then further addressing underlying problems. So, like some regions, for example, Southeast Asia or South Asia, if you see, okay, so here it is India, then we have this Bangladesh, and then we have this Myanmar, like a Thailand and all of these countries. And on this side we have like a Pakistan, then Afghanistan, then and here we have Nepal, this side we have Bhutan, right? So this actually, the region actually comprises, like a South Asia, right, typically. So South Asia actually shares a lot in terms of, like geography, climate, cultures, language, like flora and fauna, etc., etc., right? Plus we are all neighbors. So right neighbor, like right next to neighbor is going to, be of help, immense help in any like eventuality, right? Whether it is, like a happy moment or a moment of sorrow, right? The neighbors are the, like a first responders, right? So this becomes like, like a one, like a regional, like a place, a region where, like a number of things, can be shared, and like underlying problems can be addressed together. For example, like there is some cyclone, like happening at this part. For example, it's going to affect, like India, Bangladesh, like a Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia, maybe all of these, countries, right? So they can come together and frame, like some mechanism to help each other in any such eventuality, right? So that becomes, like a coming together for addressing, like underlying problems, underlying, like common problems. Further, we have developing capacity, innovation, and science and technology. Of course, at the heart of, like any new change, any new positive change, there is, like a capacity development, innovation, and growth of science and technology. So research in science and technology is an immense, like a contributing, like a factor, which will help not just today, but will secure your future, your tomorrow, your new generations to come, your new age, which is going to unfold upon you and your country. So this carries, like such an immense, like a potential. Like right now, if you see, like why European, like a countries and USA, they are sitting in a very advanced and very, like a strong position, including Japan and many other countries, because they are sitting in a very, like a strong science and technology, like a platform, right? And India also used to be a very one of the, like a biggest, like a shareholders, up to 40%, of the global GDP in the, a long time back. Okay, in the ancient India, if we talk about when, like in the present day United States of America was not in existence. Okay, and for all of these whiles in the past, like a time, India has been, like a source of place of, like a knowledge, wealth, and like a rich culture. Okay, but yes, during the medieval period it came to a decline, but yeah, again it is upon us to, like bring it up, and for that, like investment in science and technology is going to be the foundation. So take my word, this a lot depends, all our futures, depends on, like investment in science and technology, and one must actually strive to boost it. Okay, and yes, of course, developing capacity. So capacity in terms of infrastructure, human resource, like opportunity creation and all of those things, together it becomes like, like a developing capacity. Okay, and then innovation is the one of the, like a biggest change makers of this time. Okay, so thinking differently, bringing some, like a, like a, disruptive change, improving substantially, exponentially, like a moving fast, right? And developing, like a new technologies, developing, like a new, like a researches and moving ahead. Okay, so they all come together in innovation, and for innovation one need not be a trained, like an engineer or architect or designer. Okay, innovation can happen at, like any place, from anybody, at any level, right? So innovation is very, very kind of, like a frugal thing, you can call it, right? And it is very ubiquitous. One need not be trained in anything. Even if you are working at your, like a farm, in your agricultural field, you can come up with some, like innovative solution, and which may carry, like an immense potential to be implemented everywhere else, right? So innovation is not actually, limited to the classroom teaching only. Innovation is really, like a free entity in itself, and is the, like a product of human ingenuity, right? So all of these things.